Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Today we're going to be painting Starry Night, and I'm going to be drinking a little Moscato. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. So the materials that we're going to be using today are a primed and stretched 16 by 20 canvas. You can get this at any of your local craft stores or online. I'm using 16 by 20, but you can certainly change up the size if you want. You're going to want a cup of water for washing brushes. You're going to want a paper towel for cleaning your brushes. I'm using 3 brushes today. This is a number 11 flat synthetic brush. I'm using a number 6 round brush and a number 1 round brush. For paints, I'm using acrylic paint. This is an ultramarine blue, Mars black, titanium white, chrome yellow, phthalo green, and burnt sienna. You can certainly, again, switch up the colors if you'd like, but these are the exact colors that I'm using, and that's all we're going to need for today. So the first step I'm going to be doing is the entire canvas with the ultramarine blue. I'm using the number 11 flat brush, and I'm just going to be using a left to right stroke. You could do circles, you could do X's, you could do whatever kind of stroke you feel is comfortable. But what you want to try and do is have smooth strokes, so that way you eliminate too many brush marks. By the time this is done, you're probably going to see some streaking in it, but that's okay because you're going to have a whole bunch of things on top of it. So what I do recommend is just kind of using a good amount of paint. Every now and again using a full stroke like I'm using here, so that way it kind of brushes out any of those visible brush lines. And for me, I like to paint the edges of my canvas as I go, so you'll see me getting on my tiptoes to get the top and stuff, but you don't have to paint your edges if you don't want to. This is just a nice finishing touch that I like to do to my canvases so they look nice and complete, and I don't feel the need to put a frame around them after they're done. And again, I'm just kind of going left to right. I'm brushing out any really thick spots so that way it does dry in a kind of rapid fashion, so I'm not waiting for it to dry forever. And again, I'm just continuing to plug away here so I get the entire canvas covered. And you can see some of the areas are going to be lighter than others just because we're only going to be doing one coat with this color. So it's all right that there's different shades underneath there, and that's just going to be caused from the thickness of the paint, whether you have areas that have more thickness or are thinner than others. I'm just going to keep going here till I know it's kind of a boring step, but it does need to be done on this paint because we want to have that continuous blue background behind all of the objects and the sky and stuff that we're going to be putting in. So again, every now and again, I'm going to do just this full left to right stroke to kind of brush out any real visible brush marks and to thin out any really thick spots. And I'm just going to kind of keep going in through here, almost there. Just keep going until you get that whole canvas covered. And we've just got a little bit more to go here. And again, just make sure that you're kind of brushing out any really thick spots. That way it doesn't take too long to dry. And then when you are all done, we're going to be switching brushes to that the larger small brush that you have. I think it's the number 6 that I'm using today. So you can, when you're all done with this, you can put this larger brush, this large flat brush, away in your water cup. Just making sure I've got all of my areas painted in through here. Get down that side. Brush out any really thick spots I have in through here. Nice smooth back and forth. If you have thicker areas, they do take a little while to dry, so that's why I can keep going back up into the thicker spots and just kind of continuing to thin them out. So you can certainly do the same on yours if you have those really thick spots. And then I'm going to take this larger brush, I'm going to put it in my water cup, I'm going to take out that number 6 round brush and get ready for the next step. Alright, so for the next step we're going to be using the number 6 brush. We're going to be using black paint only, and we're going to be outlining some of the hills. So I'm going to be putting a good amount of black paint on my brush. I'm going to start on the right hand side about halfway down my canvas. What I like to do is I like to make a couple of markers where I'm going to start my hill and where I'm going to end it. So that's going to be my marker on the right hand side. I'm going to come over on the left hand side and I'm going to come up about 3 inches and make another mark. So this is going to be the starting point and the ending point for this particular series of hills. And I'm trying to emulate the actual original painting. So the formation that I'm going to be doing is very similar to the original painting, but if you want to mix it up a little bit, who's to know, right? So I know that in the beginning of this, there's a couple of little like jaggedy mountain edges over on this side. It comes down a little bit. There's a swooping hill in through here, kind of. I'm going to just modify a little bit here. I know that there's another rolling hill that comes all the way down in through this region. It kind of keeps going in through here. It's going to hide behind that big cypress tree in through here, so this part isn't super important. And then I know there's another little bump in through here. And I'm going through wet blue paint, so if you go through some wet blue paint as well, you're totally fine. There's another little hill right here, so I'm just going to come up maybe about an inch, inch and a half. I'm going to make that little hill there. There's another mountain range right underneath here, so I'm going to come down maybe about 2 or 3 inches and make my mark in through here. And then I know it's going to merge with this one somewhere around here. So there again is my starting and my stopping point. And it starts off, it doesn't matter which side you start off. I guess we could start here. I'm going to do a couple of little roly-poly hills that come down here, a couple of bumps. I know that there's another bump in through there. And again, it doesn't have to be exactly, but this, again, I'm trying to get it pretty similar to the original painting so you can have yourself your own little Van Gogh masterpiece. I know it swoops down here, starts to come back up a little bit, and then just kind of converges with this mountain in through here. And then what I'm going to do next with the black paint, still on the idea of the outline of the hills, I'm going to be outlining the little tiny tops too. There's 2 little tree clusters on the bottom right and the bottom left. So I'm still just using that black paint. So we're outlining the hills and these little tree tops. And for here, they're just these almost like half circle pieces. And I'm going to do a triangle for the section. So you can see I've got it going across there and down here. And then I'm just going to fill this in with little half circles. And I'm going to do the same thing in the bottom left-hand corner, only this time it's going to be like a little square. And then we're going to for the next step after this, we are still going to use this medium brush, but we're going to consider it a totally different step. So after you get done doing this, you can just take a sip, relax for a minute, and get ready for the next step. All right, so for the next step, what we're doing is we're going to be starting the wind, which I think that's what it's called, in the sky. I'm going to be using my number 6 brush with black paint only. So you didn't have to wash it after the last step, but if you did, so be it. The idea here is we still need to preserve a little bit of area above this hill there's a white or a light colored hill that goes in above this one. So when you're starting this wind, you're going to leave a space between here and there. Maybe only about, an inch or 2. Just so we can put that next hill on there. The wind has a distinct motion to it, but there's a couple of identifying marks, and one of which is in the center of the sky. There's like this yin-yang motion that happens. So that's the biggest thing that I'm going to attempt to get in motion right now, and maybe I'll just put a couple of other little black marks throughout the sky. But I want to get the fluidity of the wind to start and to get it to emulate the original painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the left-hand side, maybe about an inch or two down, and I just made a mark so I can give you more of the instruction. In this painting, he does not use a full solid stroke like down here. The wind is made up of almost like a broken line. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of skip my brush. I'm going to kind of go down here. I know I want my yin-yang thing to happen in the middle, so I'm going up and through here. Somewhere about a little bit past that halfway point is where I'm going to start to turn, and then I'm going to bring it down. I'm going to come back up, and then I'm going to bring it back over around this way. Remember, I'm going to preserve a little bit of room for that hill. And then there's another little swirl that happens in through here. So again, I need to save myself a little bit of room for this hill underneath here. So I just started my yin and yang right in through here, and then this little twist swirl. Now there's going to be stars all over the sky because this is the Starry Night painting. So there's going to be lots of stars. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of enhancing my flow with the black paint. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to, I know that there's a big star up here, so I'm going to put a little bit of that wind around there, maybe put a little bit of wind in the black up through the top of the sky. I can always add more black later if I want to, but I don't like to overdo it at this point just because I know that I've got a ton of stars that are going to be coming in and they're going to really dictate the rest of this wind. So at this point, I'm pretty set with my black marks that I'm putting throughout the sky. And again, I can always add more later if I want to. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to wash and dry this brush, and I'm going to be using it for the next step. So you can just do that and get ready for the next step. All right, so the next step is going to be done with the number 6 round brush. We're going to be finishing the mountains. So the first one that I'm going to do is the top one that's non-existent at this point. I'm going to use white paint to start this mountain. I'm going to, again, make my starting and stopping marks. So I'm going to go up maybe about an inch and a half or 2 inches from this mark, or from this hill, and make a mark. And then over on the left-hand side, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'll come up maybe about an inch and a half or 2 inches and make a mark. So now I have my starting and my stopping point. And now I'm going to be drawing my outline. So I know that it's kind of a little rolly here. I've got a bump in through there. I need to work myself underneath this wind that I've already created here. Gonna kind of just roll it over here. I know that at the end I'm gonna have a pretty good size hill that goes back up, so I've got this hill in through here. So now that I have this outline, now I'm gonna color in this top mountain. I'm gonna be using white paint to start, and what I do is I take it from the top of the mountain and I'm pulling these marks down into the mountain, so it's going to be really nice and bright up at the top. And then once I get this top area done, and you can see I'm going in the motion as if it's flowing down the hill. So I'm going to continue over here, and then when I start to get here, I know I want to go kind of uphill. So this is where I move my brush at a little bit different angle in through here. And again, I'm still using these short, quick kind of strokes. I'm not really doing a really full paint stroke at this point. And then once I get a good amount of the white on there, I'm going to start introducing a little bit of that phthalo green and yellow. Now these colors can be really powerful, so there's no need to use a ton of them or like a high volume of it. You can still continue to use the white with it. This is just meant to be kind of like an accent on this hill. And I'm going to put a little bit of that green, and now I'm going in with a little bit of the yellow. And again, doesn't have to be overpowering. This is just meant to give a little bit of an accent to that hill. And as you can see, I'm coming almost down to the next hill, but I'm still maintaining a little bit of blue behind there. And then once I get done with this hill, I'm going to not even wash my brush. I'm just going to go right on to the next hill, which is this one right in through here. This one's going to be really dark, so you can wash or wipe your brush on your paper towel, but you don't need to wash it. I'm going to be using mostly black, blue, and white, and I'm going to be using the same kind of brush stroke, which is from the top of the hill, and I'm bringing it down. So this is more of just like stripes. I'm going to stop where it goes into this little bend here. And this again is probably the darkest of the hills. So as you can see, I'm disguising my error that I made earlier, and you can even modify that shape if you feel you want to get it a little bit more accurate like the original painting. And this one I am going to bring a lot of this color almost right down to the next hill, just so it's really nice and dark. You can use black, blue, and if you need a little white in there, you can certainly use a little white, but keep it nice and dark. And then I'm going to go roll, no pun intended, but yes, a little pun intended, roll right into the next hill. And this one is a little bit more gray on the top. So again, I'm not washing my brush, I'm just going to add a little bit of white to it. And I'm going to use that black, blue, white combination on this one. And you can see I'm arcing my stroke, so it kind of looks like it's rolling down the hill here. And I'm just going to get this, you can see I'm not even adding any more paint on my brush at this point. I just want to get a nice little color on there. And then I have one final hill to do, which is in through here. I know that there's two little bumps over here, but we're going to do that on a separate step. So I'm going to do this hill in through here. This is going to be mostly white. Again, it's that same brush stroke where you're starting at the top of the hill and just kind of pulling those strokes down towards the bottom of the hill. And you don't have to cover that whole black line. That was in the original painting where this hill is kind of outlined with a little bit of black. And you could certainly introduce, if you want to, a little blue into here if you feel like your brush is getting dry and you don't want it to be too bright. And I'm just about done with this one. I think there was a little bit of yellow at the top of this hill too. So I just added a touch of yellow onto there. And then once you're all done this step, you will wash and dry this brush in preparation for the next step. All right, so for the next step, I washed and dried my number 6 brush. I'm going to be doing this flat ground part, which will also include these two little hills because they're the same color palette. What I'm doing is I'm going to be using rust and my phthalo green. You don't have to use them at the same time. You can if you want to, but I'm going to be doing, in essence, streaks or stripes left to right throughout this flat ground part. So I'm just using my rust color first, and when I get over to these little hills, I can just add a little bit in this bottom one. I don't think there was any of that color in that other hill. And then I don't wash my brush, I'm just gonna pick up some of that phthalo green and do the same thing. And I'm using this small brush because it is in essence kind of streaky on the ground, so in the original painting. So I'm just, again, trying to emulate that to the best of my speedy ability. And then I'm going to finish in through here. I'm going to put a little of this color in this hill over here, and then I've put it in this little hill over here as well. And then we are going to, if you want to, you can add a little bit of white too. This can also be added at the end after we put our little village in place, but if you feel like you want to add a little now, you can certainly do that. And then I'm going to take this number 6 brush and wash it and dry it in preparation for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, I'm going to use the number 6 brush. I'm going to be doing my first layer of my stars, and I'm going to be using white paint only. So, in the original painting, there were 12 stars. So, I like to start with the biggest one first. What I do is I do a pretty solid middle of the star, and then as I'm getting out towards those ends, or the edges of it, that's when I start to use that broken brush stroke. So that way, later when we put the yellow on it and it becomes nice and bright, we've got that solid base in the center. So I know that the biggest one is in this area over here, so this is where I like to start and get that paint or that star in. And you can start adding the little wind strokes as you go through it. I know that there is another one to the left of this big one, so it's much smaller, but it is here, so I'm gonna put that one in there. Then I know that there's one a little bit up to the left of this one, so it's a little bit smaller, so I'm gonna put that one in place. And the wind, the full wind, is going to be dictated by the placement of these stars. So you don't want these stars to be overlapping your yin and yang wind part that you've already started. So just know that you want to kind of avoid that. So I know also that I'm going to be putting my cypress tree up in through here, so I kind of want to preserve some room in through there. So I'm going to kind of jump over here now. I know that there's a little cluster of stars in through here, but I'm going to jump over here just so I can keep my rhythm and keep the placement correct. So I know that there's one up here. Again, I'm starting with more of a solid center, and then I kind of break up those edges. I know my cypress top is going to come up in through here. So I'm going to, there's 2 stars being placed here, so I'm going to do this one. This one's kind of a really small one. And then I've got one a little bit lower, maybe somewhere right through here. And again, that one's a little bit bigger. And then now I can kind of fill in the rest that are going here. There's a tiny one right here. And then there's another one maybe somewhere in through here. And again, these ones are a little bit smaller. Let's see, where else is there another one? So if I come down from here, there's one somewhere at the bottom of this wind in through here. Nice little tiny one. So I'll put one there. There's a big one right in through here. So start my solid center and then kind of get my wind to engulf it. And then there's a couple more. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I got 2 more. I got a little one over here. And then I got one more that's kind of right next to it, in through here. And then we'll use this brush for the next step with white paint. So just take a sip and get ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, we're gonna finish off the wind. I'm gonna be using my number 6 brush. I'm gonna start with white paint. And what I do with the white paint is I'm going to get the most predominant wind areas in place, and I'm going to continue with white paint until I have this wind as full as I want it to, and then I will use additional colors to just enhance it and give it the extra colors that it needs to make it look similar to the original painting. But I use the white, so I really have that nice bright base for it. And if you scour the internet, there's so many renditions of this painting, so you can really use your own creative liberty to make it into whatever you want. But for me, I really like on something like this to try and emulate that original painting. So if people do want theirs to look similar, they've got this nice base that they can work from, and then they can make it their own by just adding, their own spin to it. But as you can see, I'm making the wind go around my stars. So I'm going to keep with these short little quick motions on my brush. I do know that the brightest piece of that wind is that center yin and yang piece. So just make sure that you use plenty of paint in through there. And then even in through here, as you can see, I'm just kind of using the placement of the stars to dictate where this wind is going. I don't want my wind to look too confused, so that's why I know that it's got to travel like around the stars. And you can make it as bold or as subtle as you want, but it definitely has to go around the stars and not through the stars, or, you know, crossing over itself in any confused fashion. So there was definitely a distinct thought process that happened when he was creating this painting. So if you want to stay true to it, just kind of work your wind around the stars. And once you've got it, you know, pretty well placed, and you're happy with the placement of the wind, that's when you can start adding your other colors. So I could certainly add some more blue into the darker areas. This is where you can use a little bit of that phthalo green in through anywhere really. The colors that I've used in through the entire wind are going to be the phthalo, the blue, yellow, and white. But again, you can make it as subtle or as vibrant as you want. This is, you know, something that you can certainly modify to your own taste in color. But again, I'm trying to keep mine kind of similar to that original painting. So that's why I'm using this type of color palette, because that's what was used. And if you feel like you've gone too much, like you've added too much wind or too much color, you can always just kind of let it dry for a minute and come back with that original ultramarine blue and just almost dull it down with that type of color involved. But you could also bring more black into it. That would definitely help you to make it a little bit more subtle if it becomes too bright on you. But it will take on its own special look once you've added these colors into it. You can add blue. Again, you can make this as subtle or as bright as you want to. I am almost set here, and we do have one more step on this sky, which we're gonna do in a little bit, which is going to be adding the bright parts to the center of the stars. But we're going to wait for those stars to dry a bit before we break into adding any color to them. So what we're going to do for the next step, after you're done getting this wind as bright as you want it and as fluid as you want it, I'm just kind of enhancing my center area here because I feel like it's a little bit too dull. So I'm going to continue to add a little bit more life into it here. So what we're going to be doing for the next step, we will use this number 6 brush, but you're going to want to wash it and dry it. So after you're done getting your wind into place, let me add a touch of yellow in through here. Once you're done adding getting the wind into place, you're going to wash and dry this brush in preparation for your next step. And I think I'm almost pretty good here. Let's see here, a couple more little marks. Maybe a little more up here. It's really tough to know when to stop. So for me, I just, I bring it to the good enough stage, and then when I feel like it's good enough, that's when I call it, because otherwise I could sit here and work on this all day long, which might not make for the best TV video in town, but so I think that's good enough at this point. So I'm going to wash and dry my number 6 brush and get ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, we're going to be finishing these clusters of trees. I'm going to be using my number 6 brush. The colors I'm going to be using are white, yellow, and green. And I'm going to be using all 3 of these colors on my brush at the same time. And I'm just going to be making additional little half circles. So I am not concentrating on making sure I get each one on top of a black one. I actually don't even want it to go directly on top of a black one. I want it to just intermingle and have all different shades of this color combination and be, you know, have some dark spots, have some light spots, have some of that black showing through. And I'm going to do this in this section, and then I'm going to do it in the section over on the left-hand bottom corner of the canvas as well. And you can see I'm trying to, you know, fill it in with these messy little half circles. And then when you feel like it's filled in enough, you're done. So now I'm going to go over to the other side. Same color combination. I have all 3 colors on my brush at the same time. And I'm just doing these little half circles. When I feel like I'm starting to run out of paint, I go pick up another combination of those 2 or 3 colors at the same time. And again, I'm not concentrating on this being exactly perfect on top of each black one, but I do want some of the black to show through. So I'm, you know, leaving some vacant spots. And then we will use this brush for the next step, but you're going to wash it and dry it. All right, so for the next step, we're going to be using the number 6 brush. We're going to be using black paint only, and we're doing the first layer of the cypress tree. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my black paint. The first thing that I do is I draw a line down the center of the cypress tree. So I know it's going to be to the left of this star here, and it starts with a slight wiggle at the top. So, and then once you get past that top part, it doesn't really matter if you wiggle at all, because you're going to be filling in the outsides anyways. I just do that little wiggle at the top to verify the authenticity of it. And then you can start this any way you want with the formation, but I like to get my line going down the middle, and then I do my width at the bottom, and I kind of start from the bottom and work my way up. So I know that if I go almost halfway into my canvas, maybe a little bit shy of halfway, so if this is halfway, I come into the left just a little bit, that's where my right side of the cypress is going to start. And so I made myself a little mark. I'm going to come out here, I come in through here, and maybe back over like this. That's going to start my right side of it. And then again, it comes right up to about almost the top of this area here. And again, you don't have to make this exact, but I'm just trying to keep it similar to that original painting. I widen that a little bit in through there. Now I'm going to go in for my second little piece of the cypress tree. So for this one, I know it kind of ends up somewhere in through here. And then I can kind of connect these two somewhere around there. And this one comes in somewhere like this. I will be painting the whole thing in black, but right now I'm just kind of trying to establish some sort of outline for myself. This one might come somewhere in through here. It's going to be a little bit wider. In through here. And if you need to, like right now, I feel like I should color this part in just so I have a stable visual as to how this side is looking. And I can certainly tweak it if I need to. And you may find yourself after you see my method on getting these in essence leaves to the cypress tree on, you might find that you want to start at the top or whatever is easiest for you, but this is just my quick rendition of it and how I get it into place. So I've got this one, and now the next one is the one that connects up here. So I do know that this is gonna come out just maybe a little bit and then come in somewhere in through here. So I'm gonna get these two kind of look like they belong together, maybe make that a little wider. And I do like to use a lot of paint on my brush at this point, so this way it, I have a nice fluid stroke and it doesn't take me too long to go about it. I think there's a little poke out piece up and through here. Okay. Just color it in a little bit. And then on the left-hand side, I know that this doesn't come out too much farther than my center line, so I'm just gonna start this in through here. I know I've got a little one that comes up and through here. And again, yours doesn't have to be exactly the same formation as this one, but this gives you a good starting point to get the shape in through there. Let's see here, I think there's another one somewhere up and through here. Another little pokey one. I think there's another one coming up in through here. And maybe one or two more, maybe just one more here. And again, this is just a starting point for you. Doesn't have to be exactly like this. You can certainly modify them. And then again, I'm just coloring the whole thing in black. We're gonna go on and do another step while this is drying, and then we'll come back later to add the colors to it. So after you've got this step all nice and done, I feel like this is a little bit too narrow or something in through here. I'm just gonna close this off and hope for the best. All right, so I think that's looking all right. I'm going to maybe make this a little more wiggly up here. I'm gonna add my own imaginary point right in through here because I think it needs it right now. All right, and then we're going to wash and dry this number 6 brush in preparation for the next step. So the next step, I'm going to be finishing the stars. I'm using my number 6 brush. I will be using yellow, rust, and white, mostly yellow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my yellow color wherever I want to add some brightness into these stars. I'm coming through. I don't do the whole star, just maybe some of the center of it. I'm using some of this yellow. I'm just going in and I'm dabbing in a bright center. And then there's an identifying crescent moon within that large star. So what well then I guess that would just be the moon and not the largest star. So how I came up with the color is I'm using rust, yellow, and white. And I'm making myself this like light orangey color. And that's the color that I'm going to use to make the crescent moon shape up here. And if your paint is a little wet, you can certainly just wait, or if you need it a little bit darker, you can certainly add a little bit more of that rust color, but you definitely want it to show. And it's a interesting crescent. It's like a C that goes up that way. And then I'm going to use this burnt sienna to give a little tiny dot in the center of these stars. So just a little tiny rust dot or burnt sienna dot, and then that's going to be the completion of the stars. And the next step that we're going to do, we're going to be using the smallest brush that you have. So you can get this out, dry it off, and get ready for your next step. All right, so for the next step, we're going to be doing the entire village. This can be as complicated or as simple as you'd like it to be. You get to decide. I'm going to be using really all the colors on my palette except for maybe blue, which you could totally use blue if you want. After you see how I'm going to do this, you could use, in essence, any color you want. So I'm going to get us a closer view on this so you can watch it happen nice and close. But I am going to be using a small brush. The most important building in this village is the church. So I'm going to start at the church. The church is going to be our centerpiece right in the middle of the, in the ground here. It starts way up here, the tower part starts way up here. So I'm going to first start by just making myself a nice line, nice slender line, somewhere down and through there. And then what I like to do is I like to get this church steeple just a little bit wider as it comes down into the actual body of the bottom of it. And once I get it to there, what I like to do as I'm doing these, I know that all of these pieces of these buildings are going to be outlined with black paint. So because I don't want to confuse myself, what I do is I just leave a little space between each part. So that way, you can see I'm going through wet paint right now. So the front of the church is turning green, which is awesome because all of these buildings are different colors, so you can have fun with them. But what I'm doing is I leave myself a little bit of space between each piece of the building because I know I'm going to be outlining it with black. And this way, this gives me, I won't get confused with what pieces are what when it comes time to do those little outlines. So again, I'm doing this next little building here. This is just right next to the church. There's a little, I don't know what kind of building this is, but it's right next to the church. So on all of these, they end up being very illustrated and very comic-like. So you get to use whatever colors you want. So that's the identifying one. I'm going to outline it with black later, but I'm going to get all of my buildings into place. And for me, I know that I can do a couple of rooftops that are just merely little rectangles. I can do different colored ones. So this is going to emulate maybe some buildings off in the right over here. I'm using just various colors. Maybe I do a rooftop in through here. As my buildings get closer to the bottom of my canvas, I want them to look like they are closer to the viewer, so I'm going to make them bigger. What I'm doing is coloring in these shapes, and if you need to, you can always just take that image that you've downloaded and just use that as your close-up reference as well. And you can always, I suppose, refer to the original painting too. There's no saying that you just have to go off of mine. Mine can just give you a good base to start from. And then if you want that authenticity of the original painting, just, pull it up, Google it. It's definitely accessible. But you can see I'm just doing some rooftops and I'm putting in some varying shapes for the other house pieces. You can do different colors. You could even put some little bushes in place, which I might do it in a minute if I feel I want to fill these areas in a little bit more. You can put some bushes behind or in front to fill in spaces. You can have these rooftops all different colors. You can have cute little buildings off in the distance, whatever, I know that he has his village in a specific manner, but you can certainly improvise when it comes to this. If you want to fill in areas with little bushes, you can certainly just take your colors and just kind of fill in the spaces. You can certainly take white paint, and if you want more road or more of a light area down on the ground, you can do that. But once you've got your shapes in place, then what I do is I'm just going to use the black paint and I'm going to outline each section. So this does serve kind of a good cleanup purpose on your painting, because at some point you may, not have it as pretty as you wanted it to be. So the outlines can really help to identify the shapes. It can help to put windows and doors and stuff on here. So I'm going to add a couple of, maybe a window in there, maybe a little door here. I am going to outline this steeple, which is not the funnest of things to do. So I'm going to go a little slow here, and I might not even talk through this part. I'm going to try. But what I like to do is I've got a good amount of paint on my brush. I use my hand to stabilize myself on my canvas, and I'm just outlining the edge of it. Sometimes if you take that black paint and water it down a little bit, that can give you a cleaner line. It will make it more of like an ink consistency. And I totally just erased the tip top of my steeple, so I will probably put a little bit more white paint back on that after I get these other ones done. But again, now I'm just going through adding little windows and a door, and maybe outlining these rooftops so they again emulate that original painting. You can really get creative with this part, because if you do look up the original paint, and he's got so many different buildings, I've kind of simplified this village part just because I know that it can get a little daunting with the number of pieces that are in place. But again, if you want to go for that full-on original look, you can certainly go for that. All of the original details that he has. You can make stripes on those rooftops. Let's see, I've got a couple of rooftops over here that are just hidden amongst these bushes or tree line. So I'm just kind of outlining those. And then, let's see, we've got one more step. So I'm going to have you pan out so you can get a full view of this village here. And again, you can certainly improvise and add and subtract all kinds of stuff if you want to. But we're going to be using the number 6 round brush for your next step. So you can just wash and dry that and get ready for the next step. Okay, so for this step, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be finishing the cypress tree. I'm using my number 6 brush. I'm going to be using the phthalo green, the burnt sienna, white, and if I need to, I'll go into the black. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into my burnt sienna. I like to first identify these various kind of like leaves on here. So that way I have some sort of flow to where I'm going, and I just kind of identify these two. I use heavy paint on my brush, and I'm working it in a direction of the bend of each leaf. So because we're working on top of black paint, if you don't use white, these colors will in essence disappear, or nearly disappear as they dry. So what I'm going to do is I put these colors without the white first, and I'm just kind of getting some sort of like fluid motion going for them. And then what I'm going to do is I'll add a little bit of white after I get these colors on, just to give it a touch of vibrancy. So I've put a little bit of my burnt sienna, a little bit of the phthalo green, and as you can tell, these two are kind of identified and the rest are just going up in that generic kind of direction. And I'm continuing to just add a little bit of the phthalo green, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going into the white. Once you put the white on, it's going to become very vibrant, so just, use it with caution, and that's why I said if you have to, you can certainly go back into the black. The black and white will obviously make gray, so if you're a little bit nervous about it, then you know, just be cautious with it and don't use a ton. Right now I'm using it with the burnt sienna, so that way it is a little bit duller. I haven't washed my brush, so you get the sense of all of these colors just kind of mixing and blending together on here. And these two that I started, I think, are a little bit too bright, so I'm going to touch my black and just dull them down just a little bit. But again, you might like it really, really bright, and you might want that vibrancy in it. So if that's what you're going for and you enjoy the look of that, then by all means, bring it into whatever your comfort zone is and whatever your visual tendencies are. And then while I'm here and I have a smaller brush in my hand, I mentioned that I was going to be bringing my steeple back, so I'm just going to kind of put a touch of white back up into that steeple. And then at this point, we're just about done. All we have left is one little step which comes with every painting. So once you get this cypress tree as finished as you want, what you'll do is you're going to put this number 6 brush away in your water cup, and we'll take out that smallest brush for our final step. All right, so the final step to this painting is for you to sign it. So I know that you're all going to be tempted to sign it as Van Gogh, but I think that might be against the law. So we're just going to sign it with your own initials or your name. I usually sign mine in the bottom left or right corner. For me, I use my initials, but you can certainly use whatever you want. You can date it as you see fit if you want to. And then that is the final step. So I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you love your painting, and I look forward to painting with you again sometime.